In my previous video, I discussed how when Thomas Hardy's novel Jude the Obscure was published in 1895, the Bishop of Wakefield was so scandalized by it that he threw his copy into the fire. In a letter to the Yorkshire Post, he wrote, "I bought a copy of one of Mr. Hardy's novels, but was so disgusted with its insolence and indecency that I threw it on the fire." Well, not surprisingly, when the public heard this, they rushed out to buy a copy, and it sold 20,000 copies in the first 3 months. So it seems getting your book burned by the bishop is good for sales. So I thought for this video we would find out what the bishop didn't like and back-engineer a formula to help us construct a best-selling novel, and I'll construct a demonstration novel based on it. So welcome to another installment in my series on how to write your novel using that most unlikely of writing implements, a round Oxford bus ticket. For inspiration, we'll take the bus down to this place, Wam College, Oxford. This is where the Bishop of Wakefield studied, and here I discover an interesting fact that we will use in our story. He once met Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man, and confirmed him. Now, in making our demonstration novel, I will conduct something of a whistle-stop tour of novel construction, touching on numerous elements, such as a hook, for example, that I have covered in greater detail in other videos. So I'll put links to them in the description below and indicate with a red subtitle when I cover such a topic, like this. So what didn't the bishop like? Well, the novel was morbidly pessimistic. If you saw my previous video, you will recall the notorious scene in which Jude's son, somewhat bizarrely called Old Father Time, hangs his 2 little siblings and himself in a bid to cut down on his parents' food bill. The novel was also disrespectful to the church, contained plenty of adultery and hanky-panky, and the one crime they never forgive, Jude had ideas above his station. He longs to become a scholar at Oxford, or Christminster as it is called in the novel, and he receives replies to his entreaties such as this. "Sir, I've read your letter with interest, and judging from your description of yourself as a working man, I think you've a better chance of success in life by sticking to your own trade." But I suspect what angered the bishop most was the hook. All novels need a good hook, some dramatic event or visually striking scene that grabs the reader's attention in the opening section. And Jude the Obscure has a humdinger. At his first meeting with the girl he would later marry, Arabella Don, she throws a pig's pizzle at him. What's a pig's pizzle? Well, let's just say daddy pigs have one and mummy pigs don't. And that, my friends, is a great hook. So what is the story? Well, I want this demonstration novel to be about the boy Old Father Time. I wasn't sure what angle to take until I discovered a letter Hardy wrote counselling a friend whose 10-year-old child had just died. Did he say, "Oh, mate, I'm so sorry to hear of your terrible loss. That's awful"? No, he said, "I think the death of a child is never really to be regretted when one reflects on what he has escaped." And there I had it. Our version of the story is going to be a comedy about little 9-year-old Old Father Time, who was the gloomiest child ever to live. We will call the novel Bleak Expectations. Now, there's no way we can have a comedy in which the boy hangs his brothers and then himself, so I'm going to change that bit. Instead, he gives his brother and sister away to a travelling tinker who knocks on the door, and then he runs away to join the circus. We'll also make Old Father Time a few years older so he can plausibly run away to join the circus. So now we will plan out his story, incorporating the bits that the bishop didn't like. And we'll use this simple definition of a novel, a story in which a hero sets out with some sort of wound on his soul and sets out on a quest for something of great personal significance, and he struggles to realize his goal, and in the course of the struggle, the wound on his soul is healed. Quite often, we visualize a wound on the soul with some specific incident from the past, sometimes called the ghost. Now, Old Father Time's ghost stems from an incident when he was very young, and his father, quoting the great pessimist philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, told him that life was so miserable and full of woe that the best fate of all was never to have been born. And Old Father Time interprets this as meaning his father wished his son had not been born. And that's because he loves his father, He too wishes he had never been born, and because of this, he never laughs, not once in his life. And so this will be his quest, to find out how to laugh, which is why he runs away to join a circus, to take instruction from the clowns. Now, since we want to root for him on his quest, we need to bond with him, so we can't have him as a simple cardboard cutout of misery. So we will include a scene in which he reveals a side that touches us. He will behave with nobility. So down the road from where they live is a mansion owned by a reclusive aristocrat, Lord Midas' child, and outside its grounds lives a hermit who never washes, called Stinky Jack, and he shares the shack with some pigs. And one day old Father Time catches Stinky Jack in the act of hanging himself, and he stops him and assures him, somewhat ironically, that life is worth living. And he gives Stinky Jack his lunch of jam sandwiches. And Stinky Jack is so touched that he weeps and vows never again to be so foolish. Now, I've said in these videos many times that the essence of storytelling is the arousal and delayed gratification of curiosity. But equally, it can be good to let the cat out of the bag and tell the reader up front what to expect. So I'm going to begin the novel with old Father Time on his deathbed, looking back, and writing, "The reader may find it wondrous strange that I, the gloomiest wretch who ever lived, who yet became the happiest, should, as I lie here on my deathbed, count among my dearest possessions a pig's pizzle, dried and pressed between the pages of a book." All the foregoing takes place in what we call Act 1. And now he arrives at the circus in Act 2, and he gets a job cleaning up after the elephants. And in Act 2, things essentially continually go wrong, so that old Father Time can have his soul burnished in the crucible of adversity and the wound on his soul healed. In Act 3, he comes into a great fortune and marries. We don't have time to list all the trials and tribulations in Act 2, but I have a whole video devoted to the subject, and I'll link to it below. Upon arrival, he sees a beautiful girl feeding the elephants, and without him even understanding what is happening to him, he falls head over heels in love. And the girl, Saucy Nell, throws a pig's pizzle at him. And because of his disposition, instead of understanding that this is an act of playful courtship, he interprets it as betokening contempt and becomes more miserable than ever. And then one day, old Father Time sees a newspaper article about the famous elephant man, Joseph Merrick. The article portrays Merrick as a gentle and sensitive man capable of joy and laughter. And marveling at this, he writes to Mr. Merrick, and he receives a reply that changes his life. I'll tell you about it after this short commercial break.
Daddy, why do men fear death? Well, sweetie, you see, when we die, some of us are sent back to have another go at life. And if you haven't led a good life, you can come back reincarnated as a groom of the stool. Daddy, what's that? Groom of the stool was a job in a medieval royal palace. He was the man who helped the king wipe his bottom. Oh, Daddy, that's awful. Yes, the only way to avoid it is by writing a novel. Novelists are given a free pass when they get to heaven and go straight to Hemingway's The Writer's Bar. Daddy, how can I do that? Get Gateway to Narnia, your free 10-part email course on how to write a novel. Gateway to Narnia. The link is in the description below.
Before we get to the Elephant Man, it'd be very helpful to my channel if you could like and subscribe to the video. Now, Joseph Merrick invites old Father Time to visit him at the London hospital where he lived. And so he does, and he tells Merrick his life story. And when he relates the tale of him stopping Stinky Jack from killing himself, Merrick bursts out laughing. And old Father Time asks why. And Merrick points out the irony. And when he does, old Father Time is thunderstruck. It's as if he's been hit by a shaft of light from heaven. And what does he do? He laughs. He can't stop laughing. And they both laugh, and through tears of laughter, Merrick tells old Father Time that the pig's pizzle meant that Saucy Nell loved him. So he rushed back to the circus to propose, and Saucy Nell, delighted by the change in his demeanour, cries, and accepts his proposal. And then his mum and dad arrive, having tracked him down. On seeing him, his dad bursts into tears of joy, and old Father Time understands that it was not true that they wished he had never been born. And his dad has wonderful news. Remember Stinky Jack living with the pigs on the estate of Lord Midas' child? Well, it turns out Stinky Jack was Lord Midas' child, having abjured all riches and worldly possessions to go and live as a hermit. Well, he had died now, but he never forgot the kindness of old Father Time and those jam sandwiches, and so he's left him his entire fortune. So there we have it. Old Father Time now loves life and laughs frequently. He marries the girl he loves, and he's able to provide funds to his father Jude, so he can be accepted as a scholar at Oxford and fulfill his life's dream. And we have all the ingredients for a novel that bishops everywhere will be queuing up to burn. And if you don't want to end up as a groom of the stall, be sure to grab Gateway to Narnia.